going on, everybody? Let's learn about arrays today. No. Not like you're going to be making more money. I'm talking about arrays in computer science. What did you think I was talking about?
Where's my money? Where's my money?
Okay, come on. You have to admit that one was pretty funny. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to do it the normal way. We're going to open up our Java folder in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a new file. We're going to call this one arrays.java. Arrays.java. And just like before, we're going to make a class called arrays. Open and close curly brackets. And if you made a main method before, say it with me. Public static void main string array args. And let's get into it. Okay, so today's topic is about arrays. Now, one thing I actually do want to point out before we get started, if you've made the main method before with me, you'll notice that I always say string arrays. Well, that's because inside of a main method, if there's any arguments, args, to be passed in, it's going to be a string array. So that's pretty cool, right? So what exactly is an array? Remember how when we were talking about variables before, how we talked about variables are kind of like a shoebox where you can put something in and take something out? Think of an array as multiple shoeboxes lined up together where each box has a particular number. So for example, if I'm holding the number 0, then I have access to shoebox 0. If I have number 1, I have access to shoebox 1. 2, I have access to shoebox 2, etc. So let's go ahead and use that string array example that we were talking about earlier and make an actual string array. So the way we can make one is by typing string with 2 brackets next to it, then a space, and we're going to do an array of names, of people's first names. So let's use names as the name of our array. And now there's a couple of different ways that we can actually create this array. I'm going to create the array with 5 empty spots. And this is how you would do that. You would put an equal sign, the keyword new, and then we're going to do string again with an open bracket. And this time we're going to put the number 5, and then we're going to put a closing bracket and a semicolon. There is actually a little bit to unpack here, so let's step through this together. So first, we said that we're creating a string array, and this is the name of our string array. And finally, what we're saying is we're going to create a new string array with 5 empty slots. So whenever you want to create an array that's empty and has uninitialized values, this is effectively how you could do this in Java. So by saying 5, I could actually say 100 if I wanted to, or 1,000, or whatever number you can think of, you can put into those brackets there. But I'm saying 5. I want this array to hold 5 things. One other important note about arrays is arrays are rigid. And what I mean by that is, let's say later that we wanted to add a 6th item to this array. We actually would not be able to because we defined this as 5 here. So if we wanted to later in the code make it 6, we wouldn't be able to. We would have to either make a new array or come back to here and redefine the array to be a different size. Let's actually walk through how we could fill this array. So one way we could do it is very simply by saying our name of our array, so names. Then we're going to open a bracket, and I'm going to say 0. And let's say this is equal to Tom. What is this doing? So remember earlier how I was talking about the shoeboxes for the arrays? If you have the 0 number, you're accessing the 0th shoebox, or the first shoebox in that case. So here, by saying brackets 0 next to names, I'm saying get that shoebox for me, and I'm going to put Tom into that shoebox. Tom must be pretty small if we can fit him into a shoebox, but I digress. Now, if we wanted to do the other values too, we could also do something along the lines of this. So I'm just going to copy and paste this a few times so you can see. And then let's change these numbers 1 to 4 below the 0, 2, 3, and 4. Let's go ahead and change the name from Tom. We'll say Jill on this one. We'll say JD for this one. We'll say Turk for this one. And then for the final one, we can say Carla. Okay, so these are the 5 names I decided to put into this shoebox. What if I wanted to print them out? Well, we could do something like a for loop, what we did before. Let's go ahead and do that. If I said for int I equals 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus, then I could do something like system.out.println, make sure to put the T there. Then we could print the name by doing name bracket I, and let's do a semicolon. Okay, and make sure to save as well. So let's unpack this. So before, when we were doing prints and things like that, we were simply just printing I. And the reason why was because I is going to increase as we go through the for loop, and now you've got a little bit of experience with that. Well, since we know I is going to increase, and we want to print all 5 names, why not use I to access each of the names individually inside of the array? So for example, in this first for loop, Tom should print because I is going to be 0. And then the second name, Jill, is going to print because I is going to equal 1. Enough talking, let's run it. So let's go ahead and open up a command prompt. We're going to change directories to our desktop and our Java folder. We're going to do our favorite Java C, and then we're going to say arrays.java. We actually have an error. It looks like I didn't put the correct name for my array. So let's go back in here. We're going to change this to names. And now that we've caught that, let's save it. Come back over here. Let's compile again. No errors. Let's go ahead and run it by typing Java arrays. And you can see we got all the names to print. Pretty cool, right? There is another thing now that we've actually unlocked for a for loop here. And I want to show you a different way to loop. And you're going to think this is probably pretty cool, or you might think it's pretty boring, but I think it's cool. So here inside of this for loop, instead of saying int I equals 0 and looping through, one way we could actually loop through this by accessing each of the elements in the array individually. So how would I do that? I can do it like this. String name colon names. So now you might be asking yourself, what on earth is happening here? And that's a fair question. So the way you want to read this for loop is for name of names. That's how you want to read this in your head to make sense of it. So basically, I'm saying for every name in the names array, we're going to want to do something in here. But since we got rid of I, we no longer need it. So let's go ahead and actually make this name now and save it. And let's run this again. Do you think it's going to work? I sure hope so. Let's compile and run, and you can see we got this to print too. So here's another cool way that you can actually use an array with a for loop. Now we've talked about different ways that we can access the array. So like one way we did it was with saying name when we're saying for name of names. And then we also did it with I. So if we back this up a little bit, I'm just going to hit Control Z a couple times. And then we did it this way where we said int I equals 0, and then we used I to access names. Well, let's talk about how we defined our array above and see if maybe we could do it a little differently. Since I know that I want to put these names specifically in the array, I don't have to do the array by saying I want a new array of size 5 and then define the array values I can actually define them directly right here. So how would I do that? One way to do it would be like so. We're going to delete this. And then instead of putting new, we're just going to use a curly bracket. So we're going to do an open and close curly bracket. And then inside of this curly bracket, we're going to do our string followed by a comma, followed by all the other string values that we want to put in this array here. So before we did Tom, Jill, JD, Turk, and Carla. Let's go ahead and do that again. So we'll say Tom, then we'll put a comma, then we're going to say Jill, and then we'll put another comma, then we're going to say Turk, comma, JD, comma, Carla. Now, in this one here, I actually mixed around JD and Turk. So just keep in mind that I actually gave them different numbers in this case. So here where Turk is names 3, we're actually going to have JD as names 3. Just keep that in mind. And now since we defined it like this, we can actually put a semicolon at the end of this and then delete this here. Let's save this and run it. So we're going to compile and then run. And you can see we got it to print out just like we did before. So that's another way that you can actually make an array. So just a couple key points just to kind of wrap up our thoughts that we have for this one. So first, whenever you're defining an array, if you already know your values, you can define your array just like this, where you say, I'm going to make an array. Here's the name of my array. And then I'm going to say open curly brackets and then put everything in there. So for example, if you wanted to do an integer array, so let's do an integer array really quick. We could do this and say int. And then instead of doing quotes, we could do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if we go to print this out again, let's go ahead and compile and run. You can see that we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's another way to do it. And this will work with any kind of variable type that you can think of. Basically, it's going to be the variable type with brackets. Then you're going to have the name of the array and whatever you would like to put in here. But if you don't have a fully defined array, like let's say you're not sure what you can put in here, you can simply say the keyword new, the type one more time, and then open the bracket, put the number of items that you would like to have for that array, close the bracket with a semicolon. And then finally, that one last little cool trick that we did where we have our for loop here, instead of actually saying int I equals 0, you can say for int name colon of names. Now, in this sense, with an integer value, it doesn't really make sense to call this names. But if I named it names, I can say any individual value in the names array, we're going to call that name. And then in the array itself, we're going to call that names because it's plural. It contains mostly names. That's all for this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and kick it to me in the future. That's all for this tutorial on arrays. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. Sorry I couldn't give you a real raise like you would get at your job, but who knows, maybe if you learn from this video, you might be able to give yourself a raise later in life. See what I did there? Thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and let's keep rocking. Let's keep learning. I'm not going to shake my head as crazy as today because my head is honestly spinning still from the last few times I've done it. Take care. Peace out. Catch you later.